Congratulations, you have received your Asgard SunRanger solar system. We're going to set up a video on the installation. We'll go step by step, and always feel free to call us as you install. So the first thing, you have your piles set out here. In your installation manual, there is the layout. So your pile should have been laid out with the screw pile. Sometimes there is variance, they may hit a rock or something like that. So check the measurements after they're installed. Okay, let me grab this. So you could go from the inside of the pile to the outside to the according to the installation manual. Check that, and then also check the north to south measurement. Now you do have some variance with our design where there is the slots that will give you about an inch or two variance. Make sure so after that point, lay out your material. All the material, if you look up close here, all the material is laser etched east and west. So this is a west leg beam and the other ones are east and west. So as we did here, lay it all out east and west. That way you have all the material, and then just go from there. So with your package, you will receive a bolt kit, and every section is labeled and individually bagged. This is the pivot plates, the hardware for the panels. So every section is individually counted and packaged, so it'll make your assembly quite easy. So you could lay this out as you go. Okay, after you have the material laid out, your beams, your leg beam, you will notice on here we have slots, so that gives you some variance for if the piles are not exactly lined. The pile saddle goes between the beam. Your U-bolt goes into the slots, one on top, one on the bottom, and then you bolt it in. So first lay this out, and then we will level these, and that'll be our next step. So your connection on the U-bolt, you have a large washer, small washer, and then the nut. So loosely attach all four piles with all the bolts and the nuts, and then we will level them out. So your first step is to level out the base beams. You want to be about 4 or 5 inches off the ground in case of ground movement. Here we have some loose soil, so that'll be taken out. So your base beams start at your highest point, and whether you use, as we are, a survey or another leveling method. But first, we're going to get the level of the base beam. So this is the first step. Is that tightened? Okay. After you've determined it, then tighten these up. Now here's a point, when you are tightening these U-bolts, be sure that what is left here is equal. Don't over tighten one side. They should both be about the same amount of thread sticking out so that the U-bolt is grabbing the other side completely. So just make sure each side is roughly about the same. So after you've tightened this end, now use a level to level off the beam. This will give you a level north to south. After you have them all leveled, double check your level and then tighten the U-bolts to the required torque or until they're snug. Also, a note that on your beams, you'll notice the long end goes to the north, so the beams are they look very similar, but the longer end is on the north. But they are also marked east and west, but just as a double check. So you will notice on this one that we are quite high off the ground. So the reason for that is that this location is slightly sloping south. So there is quite a difference between the west beam and the east beam, but that is because the ground is on level. That's the advantage of the screw pile, where we do not have to level the ground. We can just leave the screw pile at different heights, and so we're not disturbing the ground at all. Attach the vertical leg beam, attach the lower. Let's see. Do one in this hole right here. The lower right side, what we're going to do is after is tip it up, so just put one bolt in, that'll give you the ability to leverage it up. So don't tighten it, just fingers snug it. Okay. There you go, that's good. Okay, after that's done, then we're going to attach the pivot plate on this side. Okay. Hang on, flip it over and shoot some. West lasered markings, flat side up. Put the bolt facing inward, the bolt and the nut facing inward. Attach it loosely so that it will move. So now we have the pivot plate, the leg beam attached. At this point you will need 2 or 3 people. Be careful when we lift this, this will rock, so be sure your fingers are clear. So this is quite heavy, but if there's no wind, it's doable. Got it in? Yeah. Okay. Push it in. There we go. Ratchet them tight. There's that. Okay. It will support itself. If it is windy, then you might want to support this. So again, now this, just do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll put in the cross cables. Now install the cross supports. That's the same 1/2-inch bolts. Before you fully tighten these bolts, install these cross supports. That gives you a little leeway, a little play in case it's not exactly lined up. So keep these somewhat snug, but not fully tightened until you get all the bolts into these, and then you can tighten the whole assembly up. Screw to prevent any movement. So with an 11-30 seconds drill a hole and don't over enlarge it into the pile. After the hole is drilled, don't over enlarge the hole, don't move the drill bit around. Impact in the self-tapping bolt provided. And that'll just an extra support, especially if you have a high wind package, that's included in that. Next, you have the full leg assembly with the pivot plate set up. Then you have 2 sets of support cables. One set is for the tabletop, and this set is for the crossing the legs. These have an eye bolt on them, so that's how you'll know the difference. They look very similar. So the way these go, so there's a hole for the eye bolt here, and on the bottom. Down on the bottom. Right there. So, let's grab one of these. will look like this. Hold it on the bottom. So you'll have one up here and one down there on the cross leg. So attach both of those. Just make them snug. Don't over tighten them. Just make them snug at this point. Then we will align the legs afterwards. Okay, that's good. When you install the cable, be sure the turnbuckles are on the bottom. Just makes it easier to make the adjustment. So there's some slack. So just tighten the turnbuckles till they are snug. Do not over tighten because that will pull in the legs out of line. We'll tighten them up after the panels are on, because that'll square out the rack, and then we'll adjust the tighten. Now we have it stuck. Okay, now you have the legs set up with the cross cables. Now it's the main beams. So you have 3 beams. There's 2 outers and a center joining piece. The way you can differentiate it is the outer beams, all the holes are on this half because they join with the center piece. So you have an outer, the center joining piece, and another outer piece. They are interchangeable, so there is no north or south or top or bottom. On the beams, you will notice there is a laser edged marking. What's this one? Come right in here. So here we have a C, that's where a cable connects. A is for your inverters, and P is for your purlins. So this is where they go. So every beam it's marked on both sides. Next step is to join these and attach them with the 1/2-inch bolts. So now that you have all the bolts in, none are tight, that way you can have a little bit of play to get them in. When you're tightening them, tighten the top first before the center ones. What that does, that pulls this joint tighter together. So tighten the top first on both sides.
You lost your socket.
You lost your socket!
Cut that out.
Okay, now that you have all the beams together, move your pivot plate to the winter position so it's upright to attach the beam. One method is to put the beam, if you have a forklift, you can lift it up, or on ladders. And what we're going to do is take this beam and attach it right to the pivot plates. So this is just one method of doing it. Throw the beam into place, use the center bolt. Put one bolt in on each side to hold it in place. And then install the remaining bolts, and then we'll move together. Okay, now that you have the beam on, attach 2 straps to this side, that's to pull it back after, and 2 straps to pull it down, put the other beam on. We use the clamp with a strap. You can use whatever method. You could attach that clamp when the pivot plate is down here before you move it up. That's one way to make it a little faster. So at this point we're going to pull it over so we can put the other beam on just off ladders. If you have a forklift, you could lift the beam up there. This is ground level installation. Okay. Ratchet it down. So we've pulled down the beam, secured it in place, ratcheted it in. Now we're going to install the beam just like we did on the other side. So again, be careful, be safe, be sure your knots are secure, and we'll go to the next step. This side, what you want to do is secure this side down just snug, because what happens when you put the beam on here, you have more weight, so it will tend to want to flip over completely. So this is just to secure it so it doesn't flip over once you install the beam. This has the high width package because we have this extra support. Goes under the Purlin and then on here. And then so just line up your marking with the hole on the beam. That's good.
Yeah, I got zoom in.
After I get all three in, then I'll explain. Okay, on?
Yeah. A little bit.
Okay, so when you have these on, you have the center one and the two supporting bolts. Now, because this is slotted, it does move. So when you tighten it, we want to push it all the way up, and then have one person push it up, and then we tighten it into place. So you do want to be sure you push it up and tighten it in, because that aligns the purlins for the bottom row. So now you want to attach the tabletop support cable. The bolt, it's marked, C is marked cable. Put in the bolt, equal lengths for the cable, as Mervin's doing down there. And then just snug this up. We'll tighten it later. So attach both cables on both sides. Okay, so now we've taken off these straps. We've attached a more secure strap because we were going to pull it back over with the 2 rows of panels. So again, attach some type of secure strapping. You can leave this end loose, and we'll pull the rack over facing south again to put on the first row of panels. Keep going. Doesn't have a hard hat, so I'll hold it, you go. Okay, so once you get it to this position, put the bolts hold it into the position. When you are doing this, be aware that the purlins are loose. So just be aware if you are in the wind that they don't fall off the end. They are fairly secure, but just be aware of that. So now we're back into the summer position. Now we're back into the winter position facing south, so that we can now start installing the panels. So after we're into this position, now we're going to attach the tabletop cables. There are holes with laser etchings with a C, that is for the cables. So attach the two cables, have the turnbuckle on the outside, just makes adjustment easier. Okay, at this point we have all the purlins on with the purlin troughs all secure. Next step is put on the inverters. If you're using the microinverter, it's easier to put the inverters on before you put the panels on. So you have a bolt with a large fender washer to support it, and there's slots already in the beams for the inverters. So put the bottom row on, and then we'll put the top row when we flip over the rack. Good. So after you put on the inverters, on every inverter is numbered so we can track the panels and the inverter and your production. There is a sticker, a barcode sticker on every inverter. Take off the sticker and attach it to the map in the order that you do put on the inverters. That way we will enter it in our system so we can track it, and you will see on your monitoring app exactly what every panel and every inverter is doing. It just peels right off, and then you just stick it to the same spot as your location on the rack. Right now we're putting on the bottom row. It's called the Z clip.
And these ones here, they just...
So we have a washer, big washer, small washer on the back end. Then another washer and the locking nut on. So what you're going to do is you're going to loosely attach all of them on the purlins, and then we'll put the panels on, and you may have to move these up or down in order to level out the panels. So just attach these loosely so that they sit, and then we'll put the panels on and adjust a level of the first row. If you get the first row all level, it makes the next ones a lot easier because they're all going to just sit nicely on top of each other. So it's worth spending the time leveling out this first row. Panels on, and you're going to measure to get them centered. You can either start with 2 panels or put all 4 on and then measure the overhang. You want to center the panels on the rack. Use a measuring tape. Measure from purlin to purlin or the overhang on the ends. Now that you have all the bottom row on, so measure the overhang is one method. Make sure that's equal, see if it's centered. Another thing you'll want to do is make sure that this row is level. A couple keys is if the panels are sitting tight with no gaps, that's one way of telling. Another one is to actually put a level right on it and level it throughout. Now what you do to adjust it is these, you can loosen those and you can slide them up or down to help close that gap and to level it. So you loosen this, slide it up to level it, and then tighten it on. So spend the time, make this bottom row as level as you can. That'll make the rest go quite easy. Okay, so now we have the bottom row on, leveled. Now we're going to put the spring bolts in. They just slide into the purlin, twist and lock in. At this point, follow the pattern in your installation manual. The red ones have this bonding washer. Not all locations have it. The red is the bonding washer and the blue is just the regular. Here's the 2 examples. So they just twist in, put the top row of spring bolts in with the bonding washer in the appropriate points, and then we'll lay the next panels on top. So follow the map for the bonding washers. Okay, now at this stage we have 2 rows of panels on. Now we're going to flip it over to put the other 2 on. We have secured the panels with some clamps just so that they don't slide over. We attach this rigging cranks to be able to pull it over because you do have bottom weight that is quite heavy. So this unit you can get from Asgard Solar on a rental basis, and also so you have this attached. You also need a line attached here on the back end, because when you flip it over, once you start adding panels, there is weight that makes it want to tip even more. So just attach a loose line and then just use the cranks, have someone on the other end so that they're cranking in sequence. Okay, here we go. So it depends on which panels you're using. You can see the leg may touch the panels, so it depends on the thickness of the panels and the size of the panels. That's just something to be aware of. This is about where you want to stop it at this point. And then you put on the 2 middle rows. Put this one on, 2 panels. And this says 2 panels. That's to keep it from balancing. If you put them all on this side, you will get weight tipping over the rack. Just it'll make it not even. So at this point is about where you start with the panels. Now that you have it tied down and cranked over, put on 2 panels in the center, and then do these 2 panels in the center. That way it stops it from twisting. When you are cranking up the spring bolts, use a torque wrench, 12 to 15 pounds on the torque wrench. Okay. Do not over tighten. Panels are durable, but you can over tighten if you're using an impact wrench. So this is the next step. Now we're going to put on 2 more here, and then the 2 on the end, and then you're done. Okay, so now we have all the panels on again. We put on these first 2 rows, then the end rows, so that it stays balanced. At this point, you could release the cables if they're zip tied on, and also plug in the inverters. While it's in this position, plug in the top of the rack with the inverters. Also, make sure you put all 4 inverters on before you put on the panels. You can put them on after, but it's just much easier without the panels. So now at this point, what we're going to do, we're going to just crank to release it to go back into the south-facing position. Okay. So now we have all the panels on. We have the 4 inverters, the micro inverters, if that's the inverters you're using. While you have it in this position, I would connect the inverters to the panels because you're on a low point here. So connect these two. Now when you're connecting the inverters, every panel has 2 leads. When you're connecting to the inverters, make sure that these 2 leads off a panel are in the inverter side by side. So not one here and one here, side by side off each panel. Because every inverter has 4 separate channels, so you need these 2 leads off each panel side by side on the inverter. Okay, so at this point, we're going to flip it backwards to the facing south position. It is heavy on this side, so you could have a couple people pull down on these straps if you have enough people. Or as they release the crank, it is top heavy here, so you may have to lift it to the pivoting point until it starts to flip over. this side, so if you have 3 or 4 people, that's better. But once you're in this position, so it is center balance. So at this point, it will be quite easy to move into the different positions. But at this point, it's center balance. It is quite easy to move. One person could move it, but it's ideal to have 2 people. And then you'd put it into whatever position. Probably the summer position is the ideal one for working for the electrical. So we're going to put it in the summer position at this point. Zoom in to the bolt going in. At this stage, we're going to add the high wind package if that was part of your purchase. So the high wind, we have an extra support beam that attaches at the top of the leg and on the side. And then on the front, this brace attaches. There's 3 holes, and that bolts right into there. So that is your high wind package. It bolts on, and it looks